For weeks, the basketball world had been asking the same question. Why had one of the greatest players to ever touch a basketball remained completely silent while the biggest story in the WNBA continued to dominate headlines? Every sports show had an opinion. Every former player had taken a side. Fans filled social media with endless debates. Some defended Caitlin Clark. Others insisted the criticism surrounding her had gone too far. Yet through all the noise, one legendary voice never entered the conversation. That silence only made people more curious. Then something changed. Without warning, Michael Jordan's name suddenly became part of the discussion. Within hours, sports media exploded with reactions. Television panels, podcasts, former athletes, and millions of fans all wanted to know exactly what had been said and what it could mean for the future of the league. The attention shifted instantly. This was no longer just another debate about hard fouls, rookie treatment, or growing television ratings. The conversation had become much bigger. Why would someone who has spent years avoiding public basketball controversies decide to speak now? Was his message simply about one player, or was it really about the direction of professional basketball itself? And perhaps the biggest question of all, why did so many people inside the WNBA react so strongly once his perspective entered the conversation? Behind the headlines is a much deeper story involving rising expectations, changing generations, enormous television audiences, growing business opportunities, and the pressure that comes with becoming the face of an entire sport almost overnight. Today, we're breaking down everything that led to this moment, why Caitlin Clark has become the center of one of basketball's biggest discussions, how the WNBA reached this turning point, and what Michael Jordan's comments have meant to fans, analysts, and former players across the basketball world. Because once you see how all these pieces fit together, you'll understand why so many people believe this could become one of the defining moments in the modern history of women's basketball. The story behind this moment did not begin with a single comment or one unexpected reaction. It started years earlier, when women's basketball was searching for the kind of attention that could transform an entire league. For decades, talented athletes had worked tirelessly to build the foundation of the sport, creating unforgettable moments, legendary rivalries, and championship memories. But despite the incredible skill on the court, the WNBA was still fighting for the level of mainstream recognition that many believed it deserved. Then a new generation arrived. Caitlin Clark entered the spotlight with a style of play that immediately captured attention. Her long-range shooting, passing ability, confidence, and competitive personality turned college basketball games into major events. Fans who had never followed women's basketball before suddenly started watching. Arena crowds grew louder. Television numbers increased. Conversations that once stayed within basketball circles became national discussions. But with popularity came pressure. When a player becomes the face of a growing movement, every action is analyzed. Every game becomes a headline. Every mistake becomes a debate. Caitlin Clark quickly discovered that success at the highest level also meant carrying expectations unlike anything most rookies experience. Some people viewed her arrival as a breakthrough moment for the WNBA. They believed she could help bring new audiences, bigger sponsorship opportunities, and increased attention to players who had already spent years building the league. Others argued that the attention surrounding one individual sometimes overshadowed the achievements of the many stars who came before her. The conversation became complicated because it was no longer only about basketball. It became about recognition, respect, business, and the future identity of the sport. That is exactly why Michael Jordan's name created such a reaction. Jordan is not just another former player giving an opinion. His career represents the highest level of basketball success. 6 championships, a global brand, and an influence that changed how athletes are viewed around the world made his voice different from almost anyone else in the game. For many fans, when Michael Jordan speaks about basketball, people listen. Throughout his career, Jordan was known for his intense competitive mindset. He understood pressure, criticism, and what happens when an athlete becomes the symbol of an entire sport. He experienced what it felt like to be praised by millions while also facing constant judgment from critics. That connection is why his perspective carries so much weight. The WNBA's current moment represents something Jordan knows very well, the arrival of a player who changes the business around them. During Jordan's own era, basketball became more than a sport. It became a global entertainment phenomenon. His influence helped expand the NBA's popularity far beyond traditional basketball audiences. Now, many people see similarities with what is happening in women's basketball. Caitlin Clark's impact has created new conversations about attendance, media coverage, sponsorships, and the commercial future of the league. But with growth comes challenges. Every new superstar creates questions about balance, fairness, and how a league handles sudden attention. This is where the debate surrounding Michael Jordan becomes so interesting. Fans were not only interested in what he might say. They wanted to know whether one of basketball's greatest figures saw something special happening. They wanted to know if he believed Clark represented a turning point similar to moments from basketball history when one player helped change the entire landscape. Because history has shown that certain athletes arrive at exactly the right moment. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird helped transform the NBA during the 1980s. Michael Jordan elevated basketball into a global brand during the 1990s. Later stars continued expanding the game in different ways. Now, many people are asking whether Caitlin Clark could represent a similar shift for women's basketball. However, becoming a transformative figure is never easy. Every generation has faced resistance when a new star changes the balance of attention. Established players sometimes feel overlooked. Fans debate whether newcomers receive too much praise too quickly. Media coverage creates arguments about who deserves recognition and why. These debates are not new, but social media has made them louder than ever. A single clip can reach millions within minutes. A comment from a former athlete can create days of discussion. A headline can turn a basketball conversation into a cultural debate. That is the environment surrounding Caitlin Clark. And that is why the possibility of Michael Jordan entering the conversation became such a major talking point. People were not simply waiting for another basketball opinion. They were waiting for the perspective of someone who had already experienced what happens when one athlete becomes bigger than the game itself. The question became, if Michael Jordan believes Caitlin Clark has something special, what exactly does he see? Is it her talent? Her influence? Her ability to bring new fans into basketball? Or is it something deeper about the way sports evolve when a unique personality captures the imagination of millions? As the discussion continued, more voices started joining the conversation. Analysts examined every angle. Former players shared their thoughts. Fans debated whether this represented the beginning of a new era or simply another chapter in the ongoing growth of women's basketball. But one thing was becoming clear. Caitlin Clark was no longer just being discussed as a rookie trying to find her place. She had become a symbol of change. And once Michael Jordan's name entered that story, the entire conversation reached another level. Because when one of basketball's greatest legends becomes connected to a rising superstar, people naturally start asking what comes next. And that next chapter would reveal why the basketball world was paying closer attention than ever before. As the conversation around Caitlin Clark continued to grow, another important question began to emerge: what happens when a young athlete becomes the center of attention in a league filled with established stars? This was the challenge facing the WNBA. The league had spent years building a foundation through the efforts of countless players who helped create its identity. Legends had competed, championships had been won, and unforgettable moments had already shaped women's basketball. But Caitlin Clark's arrival created a level of public attention that few expected to happen so quickly. Suddenly, every game felt like an event. Every matchup became a major storyline. Every performance was analyzed by millions of people who were discovering the league for the first time. For some fans, this represented the dream scenario that basketball supporters had hoped for. A new superstar had arrived, bringing fresh energy and attracting audiences that had previously overlooked the sport. For others, the situation created difficult conversations about how attention should be distributed among players who had already built successful careers. That tension became one of the biggest discussions surrounding the WNBA. And this is where the connection to Michael Jordan became even more fascinating. Jordan understood the complicated reality of becoming the face of a sport. During his career, he experienced the incredible benefits of worldwide recognition, but he also carried enormous responsibility. Every decision, every performance, and every moment was examined under a microscope. The difference was that Jordan's rise happened during a different era. There was no social media creating instant reactions. There were no millions of comments appearing seconds after a game ended. The pressure existed, but the speed of the conversation was completely different. Caitlin Clark entered a world where every moment can become viral. A single highlight can reach fans across the globe. A controversial play can create endless debate. A statement from a former athlete can dominate the sports conversation overnight. That reality has made her journey unique. Supporters believe her popularity can open doors for everyone in the league. They argue that increased attention creates more opportunities, bigger audiences, and greater investment in women's basketball as a whole. Critics, however, have questioned whether the focus on one player sometimes takes attention away from other talented athletes who deserve recognition. Both sides reveal something important about the growth of any sport. When a superstar appears, the entire ecosystem changes. The NBA experienced this when Michael Jordan became a global icon. His popularity did not only benefit himself. It increased interest in the league, attracted new viewers, and created opportunities for many players around him. That comparison is one reason so many people are watching Caitlin Clark's journey so closely. Could she create a similar impact? Nobody can predict the future, but the attention surrounding her has already changed the conversation. More people are discussing women's basketball. More fans are following teams and players. More debates are happening around the sport. That alone represents a significant shift. However, success at this level requires more than popularity. A player must continue developing, handling pressure, and proving themselves against the best competition in the world. The spotlight that creates opportunities can also create expectations that become difficult to manage. This is something Jordan understood better than almost anyone. During his career, he faced constant challenges from opponents who wanted to prove they could defeat him. Every season brought new questions. Every championship run required overcoming obstacles. The greatest athletes are often defined not by how they handle success, but by how they respond when everyone is watching. That is the situation Caitlin Clark finds herself in. The excitement surrounding her has brought incredible opportunities, but it has also created a level of attention that few young players experience. Every decision becomes a topic. Every interaction becomes a story. And that brings us back to why Michael Jordan's involvement created so much discussion. His legacy represents excellence under pressure. Fans wondered whether his perspective could provide a unique understanding of what Clark was experiencing. They wanted to hear from someone who knew what it meant to become more than a player, to become a symbol. Because when an athlete reaches that level, the conversation changes. People stop talking only about statistics. They start talking about influence. They start talking about legacy. They start talking about the future. The biggest question was no longer whether Caitlin Clark was talented. That debate had already been answered through years of impressive performances. The bigger question was what her presence could mean for the sport around her. Could she help create a new era? Could she inspire a new generation of fans? Could she become one of the athletes who changes how people view an entire league? Those questions are what made the reaction from basketball legends so important. When respected figures acknowledge a player's impact, it creates another layer of credibility. It tells fans that what they are witnessing may be part of something larger. But there was still another side to the story. Behind the headlines and debates were the players inside the league who were experiencing this transformation firsthand. Their opinions, their experiences, and their perspectives added another dimension to the discussion. Because the future of the WNBA would not be shaped by one person alone. It would be shaped by everyone involved, the veterans who built the foundation, the new stars bringing fresh attention, and the fans deciding what stories they wanted to follow. And as more people continued analyzing Michael Jordan's role in this conversation, one thing became impossible to ignore: the Caitlin Clark phenomenon was no longer just a basketball story. It had become a defining conversation about where women's basketball was heading next, and the next development would reveal why this moment had captured the attention of fans far beyond the court. The more the conversation around Caitlin Clark expanded, the clearer it became that this moment was about much more than one player. It was about a changing sports landscape and the challenges that come whenever a new generation begins to reshape the future. For the WNBA, this was a moment of opportunity. The league had always been filled with talented athletes, but attracting mainstream attention had remained one of its biggest challenges. Over the years, players delivered incredible performances, built championship legacies, and created unforgettable memories. Yet the level of national discussion surrounding the league had never reached this kind of intensity. Caitlin Clark changed that dynamic. Her presence brought new viewers who wanted to understand the league, follow the competition, and learn about the players who had been competing at the highest level for years. This created a unique situation. A rising star was introducing millions of new people to a sport that already had decades of history. And that is why the reactions from basketball legends became so important. When someone like Michael Jordan is connected to a basketball conversation, people naturally look deeper. His career represents more than individual achievements. It represents the power of a player to influence culture, business, and the way fans experience a sport. During Jordan's era, basketball became a worldwide phenomenon. His popularity helped attract audiences who had never followed the NBA before. His competitive mindset became a model for athletes across different sports. That history explains why fans wanted to understand his perspective on Caitlin Clark. They were not simply looking for praise. They were looking for insight. What does a person who changed basketball forever recognize when they see another athlete creating a similar level of attention? The answer comes down to impact. Great athletes are remembered not only because of what they accomplish on the court, but because of what changes around them. They create moments that make people pay attention. They inspire younger generations. They force sports organizations to adapt. They create conversations that reach beyond traditional fans. That is the type of influence many people believe Caitlin Clark is beginning to develop. However, every major transformation comes with challenges. The attention surrounding one athlete can create complicated emotions throughout a league. Players who have spent years building their careers may wonder whether their contributions are receiving the recognition they deserve. Fans may debate whether a newcomer is receiving too much attention too quickly. These conversations are part of every sport's evolution. When new stars arrive, the balance changes. The spotlight moves. New rivalries form. New expectations appear. Basketball history is filled with examples of this happening. Every era has produced athletes who changed the direction of the game. They did not replace the players who came before them. Instead, they expanded the sport and created new possibilities. That is why many supporters see Caitlin Clark's rise as an opportunity rather than a competition between generations. The success of one player can create more opportunities for everyone. More viewers can lead to increased interest in other athletes. Bigger audiences can create more investment. Greater visibility can help the entire league continue growing. But growth also requires patience. A young superstar must develop while dealing with expectations that can become overwhelming. The pressure to perform, represent a league, and satisfy millions of fans is an enormous responsibility. This is something Michael Jordan experienced throughout his career. The world expected greatness from him every night. Championships became the standard. Anything less was considered a disappointment. That level of expectation can challenge even the most talented athletes. For Caitlin Clark, the journey is still being written. She has already created a level of attention that few players experience, but the next stage will be about how she continues to handle the pressure and competition that comes with being one of basketball's biggest names. This is also why the discussion surrounding her has attracted people who normally do not follow women's basketball. They are interested in the bigger story. They want to see whether they are watching the beginning of a historic era. They want to know if this is another moment like previous turning points in basketball history, where one athlete helped change the relationship between fans and the sport. The answer will not come from one interview or one headline. It will come over time. Through performances. Through growth. Through the continued evolution of the league. But one thing is already clear, Caitlin Clark has become one of the most discussed athletes in basketball, and that alone has changed the conversation surrounding the WNBA. The attention has created new opportunities, but it has also placed a spotlight on every decision made by players, coaches, and league officials. Every move is analyzed. They can inspire. They can attract new audiences. They can redefine what people believe is possible. And as the WNBA continues moving through this new era, the biggest question remains: what happens next? Will this momentum continue? Will more fans become invested in the league? Will Caitlin Clark's impact create opportunities that benefit everyone involved? Those answers will take time. But the conversation itself has already shown something important. Women's basketball is entering a period of unprecedented attention, and the entire sports world is watching. The next chapter would focus on how this attention could reshape the future of the league and why the impact of this moment may extend far beyond one season, one player, or one headline. The future of any sport is shaped by moments that capture the imagination of fans. Sometimes those moments come from championships. Sometimes they come from unforgettable performances. And sometimes they come from an athlete who changes the way people look at the game itself. That is why the Caitlin Clark conversation has become so significant. Whether people support her, question the attention surrounding her, or simply want to see how her journey develops, one fact remains clear: she has created a level of discussion that has brought millions of new eyes toward women's basketball. And for the WNBA, that attention represents both an opportunity and a responsibility. The opportunity is obvious. More fans are watching. More people are talking about games. More athletes are receiving recognition. The league has a chance to build on this momentum and introduce audiences to the incredible talent that has existed for years. But the responsibility is equally important. A growing league must find ways to celebrate new stars while respecting the players who helped create the foundation. It must continue developing competitive balance while embracing the attention that comes with increased popularity. This is a challenge every successful sports organization faces. When a new superstar arrives, the entire environment changes. Teams adjust. Media coverage increases. Fans develop stronger opinions. Expectations become higher. The difference today is the speed at which everything happens. In previous generations, conversations developed over days or weeks. Now, one moment can become a worldwide discussion within minutes. A highlight, a quote, or a controversial play can dominate social platforms and create debates among millions of people. That reality has made Caitlin Clark's rise unlike almost any other athlete's journey. She entered professional basketball at a time when technology, media, and sports culture were completely connected. Her performances were not only watched by traditional basketball fans. They reached casual viewers, younger audiences, and people discovering the sport for the first time. This is exactly why comparisons to basketball legends continue appearing. Great players throughout history have helped expand their sports beyond their original audiences. They became reasons for people to watch. They created emotional connections. They made fans feel like they were witnessing something special. Michael Jordan's career remains one of the strongest examples of this. His influence went beyond statistics and championships. He represented a level of excellence that attracted people who had never followed basketball before. His presence helped turn games into major cultural events. That is why his name carries such significance whenever discussions about basketball greatness take place. For many fans, the idea of Jordan recognizing a player's potential represents a connection between different generations of basketball. The past meeting the future. A legend who transformed the game acknowledging a player who may help shape what comes next. That possibility is what made this storyline so compelling. However, the true measure of Caitlin Clark's impact will not come from headlines alone. It will come from what happens over the years. Will more young athletes become inspired to play basketball? Will more fans continue following the WNBA? Will teams see continued growth? Will the league build a stronger future because of this increased attention? Those are the questions that will ultimately define this era. Because history does not remember only the moments when attention arrives. It remembers what happens afterward. The athletes who create lasting change are the ones who continue improving, continue competing, and continue inspiring people long after the initial excitement fades. That is the challenge ahead. Caitlin Clark has already reached a level of visibility that few athletes experience early in their careers. Now comes the process of building on that foundation. For the WNBA, this is a chance to showcase everything the league has to offer. The incredible rivalries. The experienced veterans. The emerging stars. The stories that have existed long before this latest wave of attention. The biggest victory would not simply be one player becoming famous. The biggest victory would be millions of new fans discovering an entire sport. That is how leagues grow. That is how generations change. And that is why this moment has attracted so much discussion across basketball. Because underneath all the debates, opinions, and headlines is a larger story about evolution. Sports are always changing. New stars arrive. New audiences appear. New chapters begin. The athletes who define those chapters are remembered because they do more than perform. They create connection. They create excitement. They create belief. Caitlin Clark's journey is still unfolding, and nobody can predict exactly where it will lead. But the impact of her arrival is already being felt throughout basketball. The attention, the conversations, and the worldwide interest have shown that women's basketball has reached a new level of visibility. And regardless of where people stand on the debates surrounding her, the conversation itself proves something important: the sport is growing. The audience is expanding. The future is being written in real time. The story that began with questions about one player and one legendary voice has become much bigger than that. It has become a story about change. A story about opportunity. A story about the next generation of basketball. And as the WNBA continues moving forward, fans around the world will be watching closely to see what comes next. Because sometimes, one athlete does not just join a sport. Sometimes, one athlete helps open the door to an entirely new era.